Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all the friends who are preparing for JIB exams. So, as said last week, we will be posting the videos of all the three subjects in a phased manner every weekend because that's when I find time to make these videos and help you out in your preparation. So, we have posted last week paper 3, which is related to your law and regulatory subject, and now this week we are covering paper 1, which is related to your principles and practices of banking. So, we will also try to post the paper 2, which is related to your accounts module very soon. So in this paper 1, there are total of 5 modules. The module 1 is related to your Indian financial system. The module 2 is related to your functioning of banks. And module 3 is related to banking technology. Module 4 is related to banking support services and marketing of banking products. And module 5 is related to ethics in banking and financial institutions. So we will straight away jump into the first module today. And in the first module, we have Indian financial system, and then in the Indian financial system we are going to cover a lot of subunits, which is as mentioned here. So this video is all related to your unit 1, which is nothing but an Indian financial system overview, and later we will cover with unit 2, which is your banking regulations, and then retail banking, role of money markets, that is your stock exchanges, and then role of functions of capital markets, that is nothing but your SEBI regulatory authority, and then functions of mutual funds, insurance, and other regulatory authorities. Unit 7, which is related to your factoring, forfeiting services. Unit 8, risk management, Basel records. 9 is related to your alliances, mergers, consolidation. And then 10 is related to your CIBIL scores and CIBIL related debt collection methods. And then the last one is recent developments in the financial system. So the first module is entirely related to the gamut of financial system. That means it covers each and every aspect of all those aspects which make the financial system of the India. And so first of all we will try to understand what financial system is, or then we can jump into each and individual unit which contributes to the Indian financial system. So if you look at this graph here, so you can straight away know that what is Indian financial system. So basically, broadly, Indian financial system is classified into four types. So the first one is financial institutions. In financial institutions, there are banking institutions and non-banking institutions. Banking institutions are all those organizations which are set up under the Banking Act and also which are set up under the Companies Act, but have the power to function as a bank. Like it includes all your government banks like SBI, private banks like Axis Bank, ICICI Bank. Non-banking institutions means your NBFCs, the non-banking financial companies, which are generally set up not for purpose of collecting deposits. This we covered it in our last video in the first chapter of the paper 3. So all the NBFCs are also part of the financial institutions. They are not allowed to collect deposits, but they are allowed to give loans. So that is the main purpose of NBFCs. And then again, we have sub classifications in banks, like your commercial banks, we have cooperative banks, we have regional rural banks, we have foreign banks, and then again in commercial banks we have public banks and private banks. And then coming to the financial markets is your organized. There are two types: organized financial markets, unorganized financial markets. So generally unorganized is not so much important or relevant, but organized is very much important because that is where your entire gamut of capital market comes into the picture. So again, in capital market there is a primary market, there is a secondary market, and then you have the money market. Money market is all related to your management of mutual funds and everything, and capital market is all related to your management of stocks. So purchase and selling of stocks is entirely related to your capital market, and it is one of the major part of the Indian financial system. And then we have financial assets and instruments, which we will cover later. And then we have the financial services. So financial services are again fund-based services and fee-based services. So in your fund-based services, you have leasing, you have hire purchase, consumer credit, bill discounting, factoring, insurance, etc. And in your fee-based services, we have issue management, merchant banking, credit rating, debt restructuring. Credit rating means generally all those people who require a loan, especially companies or corporates who require a loan, need to have a credit rating. So there are different ratings like A, AAA, AA, B, C. So before getting any loan, a credit rating, just like if we personally want to apply a loan, they see the CIBIL score of us. Similarly, for corporates, they see the credit rating of that organization. So fee-based services are all related to your issue management, that is your IPO issue management, or your merchant banking, credit rating, debt restructuring, etc. So this is broadly the Indian financial system, and we will be covering all these one by one. So this table sums it up all. So now just moving to the definition of financial system. So now coming to the financial system. So if we see the definition of financial system, just now we have seen, financial system is a mix of a lot of components like financial institution, financial markets, financial instruments, financial services. But the main definition of all of this is like, this line. Financial system is nothing but all those units which are engaged in money transmission activities. This is, I think, the basic definition of your financial system. If you have a doubt like we are a manufacturing organization, are we a financial system? No, because we are not directly engaged in any money transmission activities. We are indirectly engaged. That means I make products and I sell it in the open market and I get money, but this is not directly engaged in money transmission. It is engaged in product transmission. So a manufacturing entity or a service sector cannot be considered as a financial system because they are not engaged in money transmission activities. So the basic principle or the basic definition of financial system is this line. Financial system are a network of financial institutions which are mainly engaged in money transmission activities and the provision of loan and credit facilities. So that is also important. All those people who are engaged in money transmission activities as well as those who provide loan and credit facilities, these are the people who contribute the financial system, or these are the people who make the financial system of India. The financial institution and markets occupy a very key position in the economy as intermediaries in channeling savings and other funds to borrowers and investors. In doing this, one of their main role is to reconcile the different requirements of savers and borrowers. That means what here he is trying to explain is Indian financial system is the main core system which is responsible for creating a balance between those who have money and those who need money. That means if I have money, what I will do, I will go to the bank and put it in FD, and once it is put in FD, then it will generate interest to me. So that is how I get my income. Similarly, my money doesn't simply lie idle in the bank. There may be people who require loans. So my money which is lying in FD is lent to other people who require money and bank collects interest from them. So in this way, the financial system, what it does is it tries to create a balance between those who have money and those who need money. Not only banks, there are a lot of institutional segments which do this, but the main role is played by banks. So financial system has the role of creating a balance in the entire Indian economy by maintaining in the level of balance between those who have money and those who need money. So that is the role of financial system, and that is why financial system is very important. So again, now coming to the financial system, there are three people who control the financial system. One is your central bank, that is your RBI, and then you have the capital market, which is nothing but your SEBI, Stock Exchange Board of India, which controls the capital market, and then we have Insurance and Pension Regulatory Authority, which is nothing but your IRDA. So these are the three main broad people who control the financial system. Now going forward, we will just see the role of each one of them in the next page. So if you see first, central bank, it is nothing but the RBI, which controls the entire banking activities in India. Their role is mentioned here: monetary control, supervision over commercial banks, primary dealers, financial institution, cooperative banks, clearing and settlement system. We will cover each one of them again in the next few pages. So this is just the broad outline of what comes under the ambit of central bank. And then banker to government, and then regulating monetary instruments, and then you have capital market is nothing but your equity and debt market, especially stock exchange is what comes into mind when you say capital market. Supervision over stock exchanges, brokers, equity and debt raisers, investment bankers are those people who try to invest into a lot of equity and debt related instruments of big corporates. You have foreign institutional investors, the foreign companies which tries to invest in the stock market of India. Those people are called as foreign institutional investors. You have custodians, you have depositories, mutual funds, listed companies, service providers to capital. So these are broadly the classified items of the capital market. And then you have IRDA, which is nothing but your Insurance and Pension Regulatory Authority. So they mainly deal with the insurance and pension related. They have control over the insurance companies and also framing rules for all the pension funds and regulating all the pension funds. So now we will just move to the first regulatory authority, that is your Central Bank Authority, RBI. So under central bank authority, we have the first thing which is known as commercial bank. Commercial bank, as we know, all the banks are generally called as commercial banks because these bank provide services such as accepting deposits or giving loans and basic investment products to corporates for profit. And public sector banks, private sector banks, foreign banks, all can be called as a commercial bank. Commercial bank is nothing but a bank which has a motto of earning income through carrying commercial activities. That means a bank is established not for the sole purpose of non-profit. A bank exists for earning some profit, and that is why a commercial activity is involved in a bank. So how does a bank earn profit? It earns profits by giving loans and charging interest on it, and also it provides a lot of other facilities like providing a locker facility or providing some sub allied facilities, and thereby it generates income. So that is how your banks generally generate the commercial activity and earn income on those commercial activities. So under the central bank authority, the first main sub part is your commercial bank, and then comes your non-banking financial companies. We all know that this main concept of non-banking financial companies came because to serve the needs of the financial market of India. Banks alone were not able to cater to the needs of the financial requirements of retailers or even big corporates. So that is how your non-banking financial corporation came into picture. So what do? They just mainly are established for the purpose of loans and advances, acquisition of stocks, equity issued by the government or any local authority. So they cannot collect deposits from the public. So that is what differentiates an NBFC from a commercial bank. However, if an NBFC wants to collect deposits from the public, then it has to apply to the RBI and get a certificate of registration for collecting deposits from the public. There are a few NBFCs who have been authorized by the RBI to collect deposits from the public. Almost around 60 NBFCs have been granted license so far. If you can go to the RBI website and search for this, you can get the list of the NBFCs who are authorized to collect deposits from the public, and one famous example is your Shriram Finance Corporation. It has been authorized by the RBI to collect deposits from the public. But in general, NBFCs are not authorized to collect deposits from the public. They mainly exist for the purpose of giving loans and also investment into your equities of corporates or government or local authority. So that is your objective of NBFCs. So best example of NBFCs is your Bajaj Finance, Bajaj Finserv. All these companies are NBFCs. According to Section 45I, subsection C of the RBI Act, a non-banking company carrying on the business of financial institution will be an NBFC. It is governed by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs as well as the Reserve Bank of India. Why it is governed by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs? Because it is set up under the Companies Act. It is not solely set up under the Banking Act. If you have a banking company such as Axis Bank or ICICI Bank, they are regulated by Banking Act because they are set up as a bank. But when you come to NBFCs, they are set up under your Companies Act. So in our earlier video of module 3, we have learned that banks can be set up under the Banking Act as well as the Companies Act. So Companies Act means all those companies which are privately set up, like your Axis Bank or your ICICI Bank. These are private companies and hence they have to be registered under your Companies Act. Similarly, NBFCs also have to be registered under your Companies Act because government doesn't have any control in it, and hence it cannot be registered solely under the Banking Regulation Act. Hence all the private companies have to be registered as per the Companies Act 2013, and hence they will be governed by the provisions of Companies Act and also the Reserve Bank. Why Reserve Bank? Because they are doing banking activities, so they are governed by two bodies. One is your Companies Act and then is your Reserve Bank of India. So they have to follow the rules and regulations of both the Companies Act as well as the RBI. So that is what differentiates your government banks from NBFCs or private banks. Private banks have a lot of regulatory authorities over them. So they not only have to comply with RBI regulations, they also have to comply with your Companies Act regulations. Similar is the case with NBFCs. They not only have to comply with the Companies Act regulations, they also have to comply with the RBI regulations because they are doing financial activities and hence they have to report to the Reserve Bank of India. So you have to clearly remember this. Many people get confused, like why Company Act is coming into the picture. Company Act is coming into the picture because these entities are private entities. These are not government entities and they cannot be established under a Banking Regulation Act, which is a government act, which is mainly related to setting up of government banks like your SBI Act and all those bodies which are set up by the government. A private bank has to follow the route of a Companies Act for setting up a company, and hence it has to follow the rules and regulations of Companies Act. The following NBFCs are not required to obtain any registration with the Reserve Bank of India. Core investment companies, that means assets are less than 100 crores or public funds are not taken. Merchant banking companies, companies which are engaged in the business of stock broking. Housing finance companies, companies engaged in the business of venture capital. Insurance companies, chit fund companies, nidhi companies. These companies need not obtain any registration from the RBI because they are governed by some other act. For example, if you see Nidhi companies, there is a separate act for Nidhi companies and hence they have to follow that regulations. Similarly, chit fund, there is a chit fund act, so they are governed by that regulations. Insurance companies are governed by IRDA, so they have to follow the rules of IRDA. And similarly, companies engaged in the business of venture capital. Venture capital means, if you see the all the startup companies which are coming into the picture now, they take the help of venture capital. That means a venture capital organization provides them funds for starting up the business, and they also take the shares of profits, and they are also separately governed, hence they are not required to obtain registration with the RBI. Housing finance companies, companies which are engaged in the business of stock broking, all these companies, if you see, they are governed by separate acts and their role is different, and hence they are not required to take any registration from the RBI. Generally, registration from the RBI is required only if you are doing banking activities. So all these below activities are not banking activities. That distinction you have to keep in mind, because only if you are going to register your NBFC as a banking company, then only you need to approach the RBI. For example, just now I have said Shriram Finance, they are registered with RBI because they wanted to do banking activity, and that is why they have been registered with RBI. But if you see the venture capital organizations or the insurance organizations or chit fund organizations, they are not doing any banking activity. The purpose of setting up of these companies is totally different from a bank, and hence they are not required to obtain any registration with the RBI. So you have to keep this broad classification in mind, who are required to register with RBI and who are not. Here we are not required to register because they are governed by separate act, plus they are not carrying on any banking activity. That's why they are not required to register with the RBI. Next comes to your concept of primary dealers, PDs. In short, they are always called as PDs. So primary dealers are entities who are registered with RBI and who have the license to purchase and sell government securities. They will purchase government securities and sell it to those who need it. So the best example for primary dealers is your Morgan Stanley. People who have heard of the company called Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, these are big MNC companies who generally act as the primary dealers for the RBI. They are registered with RBI for this purpose. They purchase or sell government securities. That means they purchase the government securities directly from the RBI and sell it to all those other buyers. Buyers may be of different categories. Sometimes banks can buy, sometimes brokers can buy, sometimes a big financial institution can buy. So buyers can be different, but the seller is always the RBI. So what happens is that they purchase the securities from the government through RBI and sell it to those people who need it. So these government securities carry some interest attached to it, and hence that's how they earn income. So primary dealers are also one important part of your financial system. Next, coming to financial institutions. Financial institutions are companies in the financial sectors that provide a broad range of business services including banking, insurance, investment management. Governments of the country consider it important to oversee and to regulate the financial institutions as they play an integral part of the economy. Financial institutions are development financial institutions which provide long-term funds for industry and agriculture. So here what is meant by financial institutions is that financial institutions are nothing but a company who are engaged in the business of dealing with financial and monetary transactions such as deposits or loans or investments or currency exchange. So, basically all those activities related to money come under the ambit of your financial institutions. There are a lot of financial institutions. For example, you can consider the Industrial Financial Corporation of India, State Bank of India, ICICI. A lot of all these companies can be called as financial institutions. Similarly, you have the General Insurance Corporation, Regional Rural Banks, HDFC, Exim Bank. All these are financial institutions because because they not only engaged in banking activity, they do a lot of other activities. For example, if you take ICICI, they have a bank, they have a mutual fund organization, they have an insurance sector. So all this combination put together is generally called as financial institution. Similar is the case with Axis Bank or HDFC Bank or even SBI. They are not only into banking activity, they are into insurance segment, they are into housing loans, they are into broad range of investment management. So all these things put together is generally called as the financial institutions. That is your providing of loan, providing of insurance facilities, credit facilities, investment facilities. So these institutions are generally called as financial institutions. Next, coming to your cooperative banks. So cooperative banks are generally registered both under the Cooperative Society Act as well as they are regulated by the RBI. So they, the name itself suggests cooperative bank. That means it clearly has to follow the rules and regulations of the Banking Act and also your RBI. And as it is a cooperative society which is registered under the Cooperative Society Act, it has to follow the rules and regulations of Cooperative Society Act as well. So same is the case, like private banks have to follow Companies Act and RBI. Same is the case with cooperative banks. They have to follow the rules and regulations of Cooperative Society Act and also the RBI. So they are generally owned and operated by members. That is the main objective of cooperatives. It's like a pooling of resources. A few members come together and put up a cooperative society and they just try to help each other. Cooperative, in our last video, if you see, we have clearly defined the cooperative societies and we have told that there are multi-state cooperative societies or non-multi-state cooperative society, because some cooperative societies are set up entirely throughout India, whereas some cooperative societies are dedicated only to that particular state. So that is how it is defined. One is multi-state and another is your non-multi-state cooperative societies. And cooperative societies, cooperative banks can be even established by big organizations. For example, companies like Jindal Steel, they have a cooperative bank within the organization and it exists solely for the purpose of employees. An outsider cannot become a member in that cooperative society bank. So cooperative banks are generally small scale banks which are nothing but a pooling of resources in order to help the small and needy people and especially the agriculturalists and small businessmen. If you see in small towns or tier 2 cities, you see a lot of cooperative banks because their approach to giving loans is much easier when compared to a bank. A small scale farmer cannot approach a bank and get a loan, but he can get some money if he approaches a cooperative bank because the rules and regulations are totally different and they get some leverage if they approach the cooperative banks in terms of interest as well as faster processing. And that is why the cooperative banks actually came into existence, to cater to the needs of the small and needy people. Next, coming to your payment and settlement system. So the Payment and Settlement System Act 2007 was established for this purpose in 2007 and is regulated by your RBI as well as the Board for Regulation and Supervision of Payment and Settlement Systems. So India has two payment systems, as we know, gross and net payment systems. All those payment systems which you see, RTGS, real-time gross settlement, NEFT, National Electronic Fund Transfer, these are all governed by your payment and settlement system. So this payment and settlement system tells you about the rules and regulations which you need to follow for making a real-time gross settlement or net settlement. So that is the main reason this payment and settlement system came into existence. It is mainly related to your electronic transfer or fund transfer. Next, coming to management of government debt. So debt management is the process of establishing and executing strategy for managing the government's debt in order to raise the required amount of funding, achieve its risk and cost objectives, and to meet any other sovereign debt management goals the government may have set. So here what it says is that the main purpose of also the financial system is to manage your government debt. We all know that government requires money to function, or government requires money to run the day-to-day activities of the government. So in this process, government actually takes a lot of loan. It takes a lot of loan from external banks like your foreign banks, as well as sometimes it takes money from RBI as well. So the management of government debt also becomes a part of your financial system because it plays a major role in your economy establishment. That is your entire, we hear terms like deficit, current account deficit. All these terms are associated with your government money. That means if a government spending is more than its earning, then there becomes a deficit. That means an imbalance arises. So this management of government debt is also an important part of the financial system. Then bankers to government. As we all know, RBI acts as the banker to the government. And we have different banks, we have personal choices, we can choose ICICI, Axis Bank and HDFC Bank. Whereas for government, RBI is the banker. They cannot approach, they are not mainly allowed to have their activities associated with so many banks. So the RBI acts as the banker to the government, to the central government as well as the state governments. It transacts all the banking business of the government, receipt and payment of money on behalf of the government, and carrying out its exchange, remittance and other banking operations such as your bonds, government treasury bills, which are generally purchased by your banks for earning interest. So all these activities are carried by the RBI. That is why RBI is said to be the banker for the government. The government's bank is nothing but your RBI. And then lender of last resort to banks, the central bank RBI provides funding support to your other banks as well. Liquidity support by in the form of repurchase of security to meet their short-term liquidity requirements. We have repo. We will cover more about this in the upcoming sessions. But as of now, you can just remember that RBI has a practice of giving loans to lot of banks for meeting their liquidity requirements in the form of repurchase of security. And that is why RBI's role has become much more important, because they help the banks in order to maintain a balance in their liquidity. And then you have the cash reserve ratio. So your cash reserve ratio is, the regulations are stipulated in your RBI Act section 42. So it is the amount of funds that shall be maintained with RBI in liquid cash. So that is the meaning of your cash reserve ratio. So what is mentioned here is that some part of the bank's money should always be maintained with the RBI as part of a secure deposit. And why is it maintained? The reason it is to control the inflation and control the money flow. So generally what happens is, like, if your inflation is very high, that means the rates are increasing. What happens? People tend to borrow loans, and if banks have the money, what will they do? They will keep on giving loans. So the inflation is not controlled. So that is why whenever there is a situation like inflation, the RBI increases your cash reserve ratio. So if it increases your cash reserve ratio, the percentage of money which the banks need to keep with RBI also increases. So what happens? It is left with lesser money to give loans to the public. So that is how your inflation is controlled. So the main purpose of this cash reserve ratio is to control the money flow in the economy and not for any other purposes. So it is necessary to have a stricter control on inflation, and also it is necessary to have a strict control on your money flow. That is why RBI, based on the needs of the economy, keeps changing this rate. Sometimes it is 3%, sometimes it is 4%. So now I think the latest rate is 4%, and that is what it is currently. But under the RBI Act, the minimum rate of 3% has already been stipulated. So this rate can be increased, but it cannot go beyond this. That means the minimum rate is 3%. So it can be 4%. Sometimes it went up to 5% also. It depends upon the inflation in the economy. If the inflation is stable, they generally keep the rate at 3%. But if inflation is high, in order to control the money flow, they increase the rate. And banks are left with lesser money to give loans to the public. So that is how your cash reserve ratio serves the needs and serves the purpose of the economy. Comes your concept of statutory liquidity ratio, which is also similar to your cash reserve ratio. It is mainly imposed by the RBI in order to control the liquidity of the banks, and this is nothing but the minimum percentage of deposits that a commercial bank has to maintain in the form of either liquid cash, gold or other securities with the bank. So it is basically the reserve requirement that the banks are expected to keep before offering credit to customers. So the minimum rate is generally around 20 to 23%, and the maximum is 40%, and the current rate is somewhere around 18% is what I believe. I have just seen that in the news recently, the announcement that the SLR is around 18%. So now coming to your definition of statutory liquidity ratio, it is popularly called as your SLR, and as we have seen that the minimum amount that has to be maintained with your RBI, either in the form of cash or in the form of gold or in the form of securities. So how this is calculated? This is calculated as a percentage of your liquid assets and your net demand and time liabilities. Liquid assets means the assets that can be easily converted into cash. So what is that? It is gold, it is your treasury bills, your government bonds and your cash reserves. So all these things can be easily converted into cash, and hence they are called as liquid assets. Liquid assets means which are easily convertible into cash. And then you have your net demand and time liabilities. So all those people who are working in bank must now know the definition of net demand and time liabilities. I think in your day-to-day working you have come across this. So NDTL, it is shortly called as net demand and time liabilities. And demand deposits, so it is again split into two. One is net demand liabilities and net time liabilities. Demand deposits consist of all those liabilities which the banks need to pay on demand. The name itself suggests demand liabilities. So what are these demand liabilities? They include your current deposits or your demand draft. The name itself suggests demand draft, on demand. Balances in your overdue fixed deposit accounts. That means the fixed deposits which have already been matured or completed, and your demand liabilities. So all these come under your demand liabilities. And then comes your time deposits, time liabilities. Time deposits consist of all those deposits which will be repaid on maturity, where the depositor will not be able to withdraw on demand. So all those deposits which are not demand liabilities come under your time liabilities. For example, you have to wait for the lock-in period of your FD to be completed in order to withdraw your funds. So fixed deposits or time liabilities portion of savings bank deposits. Sometimes the banker has a condition that this much amount you cannot withdraw for this much period. There is a lock-in period, and all these deposits which cannot be withdrawable on demand is called your time liabilities. So a combination of demand liabilities, time liabilities, and your liquid assets put together, on this the RBI specifies a particular percentage in order to maintain that percentage with your RBI. And the main purpose again is to control your liquidation part of the banks. And that is why these ratios are generally imposed by the RBI. A bank can experience a situation of over liquidation. That means if there is no cash reserve ratio, it will not be able to use its money properly. It may not have control. That means if there is no reserve at all, what will happen? A bank will keep on giving its funds to the people in need, and in the end it will be left with lesser liquidity. Or sometimes what happens, a bank may not give any loans and it will be left with over liquidity. So RBI generally employs SLR rates in order to have control over the banker credit, and also to ensure that banks maintain the solvency. That means the banking function is balanced. There is some reserve with the RBI so that the bankers, in case of any urgency or in case of any bad situation, these reserves can come into the picture and help them. So that is the main purpose. Cash reserve ratio and liquidity ratio is imposed by the RBI. So as per the act, the minimum is around 20-23%, and sometimes it can make it zero, but that is impossible. But the maximum is specified as 40%. 40% is too high, so the current SLR is around 18%. So now next comes to the important part, equity and debt market. So equity and debt market is the first thing which comes into your mind when you think of equity and debt market is your stock exchanges. A stock exchange is nothing but a central organization. Just like your RBI, we have stock exchanges which help in the buying and selling of shares and securities. So whose these shares are, why we need to buy shares? So what happens is, like in our earlier video in module 3, we have explained that one of the sources of establishing a company is equity. So what happens is, if I have 5 lakh rupees, I can start a company and my capital will be 5 lakh. Over a period of time, my organization grows big and I need more money. So what I will do, I have two options. One is to approach the bank for money, and second option is equity. If I approach the bank for money, I may be able to get funds, but the funds will have to be repaid every month. I have to pay the EMIs every month. Whereas in equity, this kind of a situation doesn't arise. So all those people who need some flexibility in repayment go for equity issue. That means they issue shares to the public. So if I have started my company with 1000 shares, I can go and issue 400 shares. So the control still remains with me, because 600 shares are with me, so 60% control is with me. 40% shares I can give it to the public and collect money from the public. I can use that money in order to develop my business, and once I generate the profits, I can buy back that equity. That means that 40% again I can buy back from the people at that particular market rate, because the share market rates are fluctuating. If my organization survives and does good business, obviously my share rate will also increase. So over a period of time, with the profits I have generated, I will buy back my equity. And the main advantage of your equity is that you don't need to pay any interest. You only need to pay dividend every year to the equity shareholders, and that is also not mandatory. Only if you have profits and only if you decide to pay dividend, then you can pay. If not, you can simply skip. And also, equity issue is not an easy job. There are some conditions which the SEBI has specified, that your last 3 years you should be in profits, you should have sufficient reserves in your balance sheet, and then only you will be able to issue the equity. So there are pros and cons attached to both equity as well as loan. So but here now we are discussing about stock exchanges. Stock exchanges mainly deal with the purchase and selling of shares. Just like I have explained, now the 40% shares which I have issued to the public now will be traded in the stock exchanges. Today some people, if it is at 10 rupees, someone may buy it at 11 rupees. Tomorrow someone may wish to buy it at 12 rupees, and if my business is not doing well, it can go up to 2 rupees also. So this share market is a thing which is a speculative transaction, and it depends upon the performance of the business as well as the general market opinion. Like, there should be people who are interested to buy your shares. That is how the share prices get fluctuated. And then you have your brokers is nothing but all those people who facilitate this purchase and sale of shares. You have Sher Khan, you have Motilal Oswal. These are the people who are generally called as brokers. They help you in order to open a demat account. Demat account is must for dealing or trading in shares and securities. So they open a demat account on your behalf with the SEBI, and they allow you to purchase and sell shares with the stock exchanges. And brokers have, there are a lot of brokers now. They Zerodha Stock Exchange, Zerodha broker, and you have Motilal, you have Sher Khan. So a lot of brokers, ICICI. So you just need to choose the broker which you want, and then you can start trading in the stock exchanges. And you have equity and debt raisers. Equity and debt raisers means nothing but generally these people will raise money for you either in the form of equity or in the form of debt. Just now I have explained equity to you. In similar way, you can also issue debentures, but debentures is more like a loan, because in debentures what happens is, like, it is not shares. Debentures means you issue a piece of paper to the public. That means I issue a debenture for 100 rupees. So I say that I need 100 rupees, and whoever gives me 100 rupees, I will pay 10% interest to him. So people subscribe to these debentures. That means people purchase these debentures and I have to pay interest to them. And it is similar to a loan, but in loan you approach a bank, whereas in debentures you approach the retail participants or the institutional buyers. Generally all the big institutional buyers subscribe to your debentures. Investment bankers, as they are mainly famous for your investment activities. They give you a lot of advice related to investment, where I can put my money, how I can generate income out of my idle funds. So that is what the investment bankers do. Foreign institutional investors are those investors who are registered in a country outside India, but they have been given permission by the Foreign Exchange Act as well as the RBI as well as the SEBI to invest into the stock market of India. They can invest in mutual funds, they can invest in a pension funds, they can invest in share market. So they have been given the powers to invest. Why have been they given the powers? Because a country needs inflow of money, isn't it? We can't solely depend on internal money. So we allow people from other countries to invest in our stock market. Thereby foreign inflow of money comes into the picture. They bring their money into our stock market, and our economy is developed in a way because of these foreign funds. And then you have custodians. A custodian is nothing but a financial institution that holds customer securities for safekeeping. Generally in the olden days, custodians were there who used to keep the securities, just like a safe locker. But now everything has become electronic, and a custodian now even holds the securities in electronic form, because physical form is almost over. Nowadays everything is dematerialized and everything has become electronic. And then you have your depositories. A depository is nothing but something for storage or safeguarding, and that is what your functions is. Your organization, banks, institutions, all these people do the functions of depositories. And then you have the mutual funds is just similar to share market, but what happens in mutual funds is, because there is an experienced person who invests on your behalf. For example, many people don't know about share market. They just enter into the share market and invest into some shares, and those shares drop and they lose their money. So what mutual funds does is, they have people who are specifically trained in share market investing. They collect money from you, they invest into different shares and then they generate income out of this. This is nothing but an indirect investment into your share market, but on your behalf an organization separately trades. So that is what the main purpose of mutual funds is. They invest into various shares depending upon your requirement. If you want more money, they will invest into risky shares. If you want lesser money, they will invest into smaller safe shares. So it depends upon what kind of income you are requiring. So a lot of mutual fund organizations are also there in India, as you might be knowing. You have your SBI mutual fund, you have your ICICI, HDFC. All these are nothing but mutual fund organizations. And then you have markets like registrars. The registrar accounts for all issued and outstanding shares, as well as the number of shares owned by each individual shareholder. That means nothing but, whenever you purchase any shares, there is a entry. So these registrars generally account for all the issued shares. So that is what this register is all meant for. Next comes your Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority. So far we have seen two important financial regulatory authorities. One is your RBI, the central bank, and then we have seen SEBI, that is your stock market, and now the third one, IRDA, Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority. So under this you have the Multi Commodity Exchange of India, the India's first listed exchange for commodity derivatives. That means so far we have seen share market only, but there is something called as commodity market. What is this commodity market? You have your zinc, you have your crude oil, you have your silver, you have your gold. These are the important commodities, and even these are traded. That means, just like shares, people invest in these kind of online commodities also and make money. Like, if today I feel that the gold price is 50,000, I will invest into gold market, and tomorrow if it goes to 55,000, I get a 5,000 gain. So that is what your commodity market. It is similar to your share market. Everything is similar. You have your brokers, you have your stock market, and everything similar, but the only thing which differentiates is that here commodities are traded and not shares, and here Multi Commodity Exchange of India is the regulatory authority and not your SEBI. So that is the only difference. So now we have, and other than this we also have your insurance funds, pension funds, which generally, cater to your requirement of generating income in the form of pension funds, gratuity funds, and other insurance funds. Even insurance also, there are different types of insurance like term insurance, medical insurance. All this comes under your Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority. So that is what your main purpose of Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority. So these are the three broad classifications of your financial system. So you just need to have a look at it, each one of them, and you just need to remember it, because sometimes it become confusing, but if you have the habit of reading it over and over, then it becomes easy for you. So this is all about unit 1, and in your unit 2 I'll be making a separate video which is related to your banking regulations. So I hope the video has been clear, and if at all you have any doubts, you can please join our Telegram group, and it is an open group for discussion. And in case you don't understand anything in this subject as well as other subjects, please let me know. I will try to convey the doubts to you as soon as possible. And please spread these videos to as many people as possible who are preparing for JIB exams, and it will give me more support in order to make such videos repeatedly, and thereby it will be a good encouragement for me. And I hope this video benefits to you, and please let me know your feedback, and thank you very much for your time.